If someone had told me that the happiest season of my life would become the beginning of my worst nightmare, I would have laughed. At 7 months pregnant, I thought my biggest worry was decorating the nursery before the baby arrived. I had no idea. I was about to lose my home, my marriage, and the man I thought would always protect me. My name is Emma Wilson. I'm 32 years old, and this is how everything fell apart. David and I had been married for 4 years. He was charming, successful, thoughtful. At least, that's the version of him everyone else knew. When we found out I was pregnant, he cried harder than I did. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "We're finally going to be parents," he whispered. For months, he treated me like a queen. He attended every doctor's appointment. He rubbed my feet whenever they hurt. He read parenting books every night before bed. I truly believed I had married the perfect man. One Saturday morning, I was sitting in the baby's room, carefully arranging tiny clothes in the closet. Pink blankets, little stuffed animals, tiny socks no bigger than my fingers. I smiled without realizing it. Everything finally felt real. David walked in holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He kissed my forehead. "I have something to ask." I smiled. "What is it?" He looked strangely nervous. "You remember my ex-wife, Rachel?" The smile disappeared from my face. I had never met Rachel, but I knew enough. They had divorced 5 years before David met me. According to him, the marriage had ended peacefully. "We haven't spoken much since then," he always said. "So, why was he bringing her up now?" David sighed. "Rachel lost her apartment." I frowned. "Oh, she also lost her job." "I'm sorry to hear that." He nodded. I was wondering if she could stay here. For a second, I thought I had heard him wrong. What? Just for a week? Maybe 2. Until she gets back on her feet. I stared at him in disbelief. "You want your ex-wife to move into our house?" "It's temporary. She's alone. She has nowhere else to go." I looked around the nursery. My due date is only 2 months away. I know, but it's the right thing to do. I didn't answer immediately. Every instinct inside me screamed, "No." But then guilt crept in. What if she really had nowhere to go? What if she genuinely needed help? David took my hand. "Emma, you have the kindest heart of anyone I've ever known. I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious." That sentence broke my resistance. Against my better judgment, I quietly nodded. 1 week. No longer. David smiled with relief. "I promise." That promise would become the first of many lies. Rachel arrived 3 days later. She stepped out of a taxi carrying 2 expensive-looking suitcases. She certainly didn't look homeless. She wore designer clothes, perfect makeup, gold jewelry, and a smile that felt practiced. She hugged David first, longer than I thought was appropriate. Then she turned to me. "You must be Emma." She looked me up and down. "Oh my goodness. You're even bigger than I imagined." She laughed. I forced a smile. "Pregnancy will do that." She didn't apologize. She simply walked inside, as if she already belonged there. The first few days weren't terrible. Rachel was polite. She offered to cook dinner. She cleaned the kitchen. She complimented the nursery. I started thinking, maybe I had judged her too quickly. Then, little things began happening. I would leave my favorite mug on the counter. The next morning, Rachel was using it. I'd buy my favorite yogurt. She'd eat it. I'd sit beside David on the couch. She'd suddenly squeeze between us to show him something on her phone. Every single time, David laughed it off. "Emma, she's just getting comfortable. Don't overthink it." Maybe he was right. Maybe pregnancy hormones were making me emotional. That's exactly what I kept telling myself. 2 weeks passed. Rachel was still living with us. One evening, I asked David when she planned to leave. He didn't even look up from his laptop. "She needs a little more time." "You promised 1 week." "I know. But what's another week?" I felt disappointed, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to argue while carrying our child. 3 nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. The baby was kicking. I slowly walked downstairs to get a glass of water. As I reached the kitchen, I heard voices coming from the living room. David and Rachel. I stopped walking. Neither of them knew I was awake. Rachel laughed softly. I told you she'd never say no. David chuckled. I know. She's too trusting. My heart skipped a beat. Rachel spoke again. So, how much longer? David answered, without hesitation. Not much. Everything is going exactly as planned. My hands began shaking. I couldn't see them from where I stood. But I didn't need to. Those 8 words echoed through my mind. Everything is going exactly as planned. Planned? What exactly had they planned? And why did it suddenly feel like I was the only person living in that house, who had no idea what was really happening? I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. One sentence kept repeating in my mind. Everything is going exactly as planned. Planned. Those weren't the words of 2 people trying to help someone in need. Those were the words of people hiding something. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. I smiled, made breakfast, asked David how he slept. He smiled back as if everything was perfectly normal. Like a baby. I almost laughed. The irony was unbelievable. Rachel walked into the kitchen wearing one of David's oversized hoodies. For a moment, I froze. I had never seen that hoodie before. David noticed me staring. Oh, Rachel spilled coffee on her sweater yesterday. I told her she could borrow one of mine. Rachel smiled. I hope you don't mind. I forced a smile. It's fine. But deep inside, it wasn't fine. It wasn't about the hoodie. It was about boundaries. And little by little, every boundary in my home was disappearing. That afternoon, I had another doctor's appointment. David had promised weeks ago that he would come. As I finished getting ready, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and sighed. I'm sorry, Em. Emergency meeting. I have to go. I looked disappointed. You promised. I know. I'll make it up to you. Before I could answer, Rachel walked into the hallway. I can go with Emma. David smiled. Perfect. I quickly shook my head. No. I'll go alone. Neither of them argued. At the hospital, everything looked perfect. The baby's heartbeat was strong. Growth was normal. The doctor smiled. Your daughter is healthy. Hearing those words should have made me happy. Instead, I felt strangely alone. Every other expectant mother had someone beside her. A husband, a partner, a family member. I sat there by myself, wondering where my husband really was. On the drive home, I decided to stop by David's office. Not because I wanted to spy on him, because I wanted to surprise him with his favorite lunch. I walked into the reception area carrying a bag of food. The receptionist smiled politely. Can I help you? I'm here to see David Wilson. She looked confused. David? Yes. He works here. She checked her computer, then looked back at me. I'm sorry. He hasn't been here today. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? He called this morning. He said he was taking a personal day. I felt the room spinning. Personal day? Then where was he? I slowly walked back to my car. My hands were trembling. For the first time, I didn't make excuses for him. I didn't tell myself there had to be an explanation. Because there wasn't. He had lied. Again. When I arrived home, David's car wasn't in the driveway. Neither was Rachel's taxi. The house was empty. I quietly walked upstairs. As I passed the guest room, I noticed the door was slightly open. Rachel's suitcase sat on the bed, half unzipped. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I only wanted to close the door. But then, something caught my eye. A framed photograph. I picked it up. It showed David, Rachel, and a little boy, about 5 years old. My heart stopped. David had told me they never had children. He said they divorced before starting a family. So, who was the little boy? I turned the frame over. Written on the back, in black ink, were 4 simple words. Our family forever. 2022. I felt cold all over. David and I had already been married in 2022. I quickly took out my phone and snapped a picture of the frame. Then I placed it exactly where I'd found it. That evening, David and Rachel finally came home together. They were laughing as they walked through the front door. The moment they saw me, the laughter stopped. "How was your appointment?" David asked. "Fine. Everything okay?" "Perfect." He smiled with relief. I smiled back. For the first time, I lied to him because I wasn't ready to reveal what I knew. Not yet. 2 days later, I started preparing invitations for the baby shower. My sister Sophie came over to help. While we were decorating, she quietly pulled me aside. "Emma, I don't want to upset you, but I saw David yesterday." I looked up. "At work?" She slowly shook her head. "No. He was at a jewelry store." My eyebrows lifted. "A jewelry store?" He wasn't alone. My heart immediately sank. "Rachel." Sophie nodded. "I thought maybe they were buying you a surprise." She hesitated. But then, I saw him holding her hand. I couldn't speak. My ears started ringing. How many lies could one marriage survive? That night, after everyone went to bed, I quietly opened David's home office. I had never searched through his things before. Never. But trust had already been shattered. As I opened the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a large brown envelope. Across the front, my name was written in bold letters. Emma Wilson. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were legal documents, property records, bank statements, and one page that made my blood run cold. It was titled Transfer of Ownership, and at the bottom, someone had signed my name, except it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it. I suddenly realized Rachel wasn't in my house because she needed help. She was there because together, they were trying to take something that belonged to me. I couldn't stop staring at the papers. Transfer of ownership, my forged signature, bank documents, property records. None of it made sense. The house belonged to me. My grandmother had left it to me years before I ever met David. He couldn't legally take it, unless someone believed I had agreed. My hands were shaking as I photographed every single page with my phone. Then I carefully returned everything exactly where I had found it. David could never know I had seen those documents. Not yet. The next morning, I called my attorney, Rebecca Lawson. She had helped one of my friends through a complicated divorce several years earlier. After listening to my story, she became unusually quiet. Finally, she said, "Emma, don't confront your husband. Not yet." I frowned. "Why?" "Because if he's forging documents, there's a good chance he's hiding much more. I need evidence. Real evidence." She gave me one instruction. Act normal. Let them believe you, suspect nothing. It sounded impossible, but I agreed. Over the next week, I became an actress inside my own home. I laughed at dinner. I thanked Rachel whenever she cooked. I smiled when David kissed my forehead. Inside, I was counting every lie, every glance, every whispered conversation, every strange phone call. The more I watched, the more I realized they were becoming careless. One afternoon, Rachel walked into the nursery carrying a measuring tape. "What are you doing?" I asked. She smiled. "I'm just checking the room." "For what?" She looked around thoughtfully. "This room gets the best sunlight." I laughed awkwardly. "Of course. It's the baby's room." She smiled again. "Babies grow up. Rooms change." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. A few days later, David announced he had another business trip. "Just 2 nights. I'll be back before the baby shower." I nodded. "Drive safely." The moment he left, Rachel suddenly remembered she had plans with a friend. She left less than 10 minutes later. I watched both cars disappear. Then I grabbed my purse. This time, I wasn't staying home, keeping a safe distance. I followed David. He wasn't driving toward the airport. He wasn't driving toward his office. Instead, he pulled into the parking lot of an expensive law firm. A few minutes later, Rachel arrived in another car. The two of them walked inside together. My heart was pounding. Why would they meet a lawyer? Without telling me? I waited nearly an hour. When they finally came out, David was carrying a thick folder. Rachel looked happier than I'd ever seen her. As they stood beside the car, I watched David hug her. Then, he kissed her. Not on the cheek. Not like old friends. A real kiss.
Long.
Comfortable. Familiar. I felt my heart break all over again. But this time, I didn't cry. Instead, I took out my phone and captured everything. Every photograph. Every second. Every lie. That evening, David came home pretending nothing had happened. Business trip canceled. He smiled. My meeting finished early. I smiled back. That's wonderful. He kissed my forehead. I missed you. I looked straight into his eyes. So did I. For the first time in my life, I understood how easily lies could sound like love. The following morning, Rebecca called. I have good news. What is it? I checked the property records. The forged transfer hasn't been approved. I finally breathed again. So the house is still mine? Yes. But someone has already submitted the paperwork. My heart dropped. They're trying to move quickly. Rebecca continued. I also found something else. What? The lawyer representing David is Rachel's cousin. I closed my eyes. Of course. None of this was random. It had been planned from the beginning. 3 days later, the baby's shower finally arrived. Family members filled the backyard. Pink balloons floated everywhere. Everyone laughed. Everyone smiled. Everyone believed it was the happiest day of my life. David wrapped his arm around my shoulder. Rachel stood nearby chatting with guests, as if she were part of the family. Then, I noticed something strange. Rachel walked over to my elderly grandmother's best friend, Mrs. Helen. She handed her a document. Mrs. Helen adjusted her glasses. Read it. And suddenly looked confused. She glanced toward me, then back at Rachel. Rachel quickly took the papers back, as if she hadn't wanted anyone else to notice. A few minutes later, Mrs. Helen quietly walked over to me. She slipped a folded note into my hand and whispered, "Don't let them make you sign anything today." Before I could ask what she meant, she walked away. My heart started racing. I unfolded the note beneath the table. Only one sentence was written on it. Your husband says you're selling the house after the baby is born. I looked across the yard. David and Rachel were smiling, laughing, greeting guests, as if nothing was wrong. But in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They weren't just planning to steal my home. They believed they were already close to succeeding. The note slipped from my fingers. Your husband says you're selling the house after the baby is born. I looked across the backyard. David was laughing with my brother. Rachel was helping my mother arrange gifts on the table. To everyone else, they looked like the perfect couple supporting a pregnant wife. Only I knew they were smiling while planning to steal my future. I quietly folded the note and placed it inside my purse. Not a single expression crossed my face. Rebecca had warned me, don't let them know you know. So I smiled. I thanked guests for coming. I opened baby gifts. I posed for photographs. Inside, I was preparing for war. That evening, after everyone had gone home, David wrapped his arms around me. The baby shower was perfect. I nodded. It really was. He kissed my forehead. I'm lucky to have you. For a brief moment, I wondered if he even heard the lies coming out of his own mouth. The following morning, I met Rebecca at her office. She carefully examined every document I had photographed. Then she smiled. Emma, this is exactly what we needed. What do you mean? They've made a huge mistake. She pointed to one page. The forged signature isn't the only crime. I looked closer. Rachel's name appeared on several documents. So, Rebecca tapped the paper. They've already drafted paperwork transferring your house into a family trust. I frowned. What family? Rebecca looked me in the eyes. David, Rachel, and someone named Ethan Wilson. I froze. Ethan? I don't know anyone named Ethan. Rebecca slowly closed the file. I think you do. She slid another document toward me. It was a birth certificate. Father, David Wilson. Mother, Rachel Wilson.
Child.
Ethan Wilson.
Age.
5 years old. Suddenly, everything clicked. The photograph. The little boy. The words written behind it. Our family forever. David hadn't just lied about his ex-wife. He had lied about having a child. For 4 years of marriage, he had hidden his own son from me. I couldn't stop crying, not because David had a child, but because he had built our marriage on deception. Every anniversary, every Christmas, every promise, every dream about starting our own family, he already had one. He had simply erased them from his story. Rebecca handed me a tissue. Emma, there's more.
I
Looked up. The trust documents state that after a property is transferred, the house will become Ethan's legal inheritance. I stared at her. So, they were never stealing it for themselves. They were stealing it for their son. Rebecca nodded. Exactly. That night, I couldn't even look at David. Every smile felt fake. Every word sounded rehearsed. Rachel noticed. You look tired. I smiled politely. Pregnancy. She laughed. You should really avoid stress. The irony almost made me laugh. A few days later, I received a phone call from an unknown number. Mrs. Wilson? Yes. My name is Karen. I'm Rachel's former coworker. I frowned. How did you get my number? I've been trying to decide whether to call you. After everything I saw, I couldn't stay quiet. My heart started racing. What happened? Karen took a deep breath. Rachel never lost her apartment. What? She never lost her job either. I closed my eyes. I knew it. Karen continued. Moving into your house was her idea. And David agreed. Every word felt like another knife. Then Karen said something I never expected. I overheard Rachel talking. She said, once Emma signs the final papers after the baby is born, she'll have no idea what happened until it's too late. I felt cold all over. What papers? I don't know. But she kept saying, pregnant women sign anything if you tell them it's hospital paperwork. My hands began shaking. Hospital paperwork? They were planning to trick me during childbirth. The moment I'd be exhausted, medic, aided, and focused on my baby, they wanted me to sign away my own home. The next morning, Rebecca immediately contacted the police. A detective specializing in financial fraud agreed to investigate. His advice was simple. Don't stop them. What? We need them to believe their plan is working. If they present forged documents, we'll catch them in the act. For the first time, I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. If David and Rachel wanted to play a game, they had no idea. The rules had just changed. 1 week later, my water broke. David rushed me to the hospital. Rachel insisted on coming too. As the nurses wheeled me toward the delivery room, I noticed Rachel whispering to David. He nodded, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. Exactly as Karen had warned me. I knew the moment I gave birth, they were going to make their move. The contractions came faster. Every few minutes, another wave of pain rushed through my body. David held my hand. You'll be okay. I looked at him. It was strange. The same hand that once made me feel safe now belonged to a complete stranger. Rachel waited outside the delivery room. Every few minutes, she peeked through the glass window, watching, waiting, not for my daughter to be born, but for something else. After several exhausting hours, a loud cry filled the room. My daughter had arrived. The nurse gently placed her in my arms. She was perfect. Tiny fingers, tiny nose, bright little eyes. I kissed her forehead and whispered, I'll protect you, no matter what. At that moment, I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a mother, and mothers fight differently. About an hour later, the nurse stepped out to bring medication. Only David remained inside the room. He smiled warmly. You did amazing. Then, he picked up a folder from the chair beside him. Before we leave, there are a few hospital forms. I've already filled out most of them. You just need to sign. Exactly. As Karen had warned me, I looked at the papers, without touching the pen. I can't read right now. David smiled. They're just routine documents. I quietly replied, then you won't mind if my lawyer reads them first. The smile disappeared from his face. My lawyer? Yes. I asked her to come. His hands began trembling. At that exact moment, the hospital room door opened. Rebecca walked in. Behind her were two detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit. David immediately stood up. "What is this?" Detective Harris calmly answered, "A fraud investigation." Rebecca took the folder from David's hands. She flipped through the pages, then looked at the detective. "These aren't hospital documents." She held up the first page. Transfer of property ownership. The second, power of attorney. The third, financial authorization. Every single page required my signature. Not because I was in the hospital, because I was vulnerable. Exactly as Rachel had planned. Rachel suddenly rushed into the room. "What's happening?" Detective Harris turned toward her. "Ms. Rachel Wilson, you're under investigation for conspiracy, identity fraud, and attempted property theft." Her face turned pale. "You can't prove anything." Rebecca smiled. "Oh, we can." She handed over copies of the forged documents, the secret recordings, Karen's witness statement, security footage, the photographs I had taken outside the law office, bank records, every lie, every plan, every crime. The detectives had everything. Rachel looked at David in panic. "Say something." David couldn't. For the first time, he had no lies left. The detective handcuffed Rachel first. She screamed at David. "You promised this would work. You said she'd never find out." The hallway outside the hospital became silent. Every nurse, every doctor, every visitor stopped to watch. David lowered his head. "I never wanted this." Rebecca answered quietly, "But you planned it." 3 months later, the case finally reached court. Evidence after evidence was presented. The judge listened for days. Financial experts testified. Handwriting experts confirmed my signature had been forged. Karen told the court everything she had overheard. Even the lawyer Rachel's cousin admitted he had been misled about the documents. The truth became impossible to deny. The judge's final ruling was clear. The house remained completely mine. Every forged document was declared invalid. David lost every legal claim to my property. Rachel was convicted of fraud and conspiracy. David accepted a plea agreement after confessing his role. He received probation, community service, heavy financial penalties, and was permanently barred from handling financial documents for several years. Our divorce was finalized soon afterward. I was granted full custody of my daughter. David was given limited, court-supervised visitation until he completed every legal requirement. A year later, life looked completely different. I had renovated my grandmother's house. The nursery was now filled with laughter instead of fear. My interior design business had grown beyond anything I imagined. I hired new employees, opened a beautiful studio downtown, and for the first time, I truly felt free. One afternoon, my daughter took her first steps across the living room. She laughed as she stumbled into my arms. I cried, not because I was sad, but because I realized something. If David and Rachel had succeeded, she would have grown up believing that house had never belonged to us. Instead, it would always be her safe place, just as it had been mine. Several months later, I received one final letter. It was from David. Inside was a single page. "Emma, I lost the best thing that ever happened to me because I chose lies over loyalty. Every day I regret the family I destroyed. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that one day our daughter will know how deeply I loved her, even if I failed her mother. David." I folded the letter, placed it inside a box with the rest of the past. Then I closed the lid. Some chapters deserve to stay closed forever. I picked up my daughter, walked into the backyard where her birthday decorations danced in the wind. The same house, the same garden, the same dreams. Only one thing had changed. This time, no one could ever take them away from us. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's building a life so peaceful that the people who betrayed you become nothing more than a distant memory.